From the Romanesque era to the Renaissance era, you start to see beautiful works of art in the form of stained glass. What is fascinating about stained glass is how it was started and how it has progressed over the many eras of time. In the beginning, glass was literally stained with paint and precious metals. Many of the early windows of this art form are still visible today in cathedrals around the world. Looking at different styles of stained glass throughout the late Romanesque, Gothic, and Renaissance periods up to the early beginnings of stained glass in America, I will share with you some of the many techniques used to produce these amazing windows of art and how they are done today. The term stained glass derives from the silver stain that was often applied to the side of the window that would face outside of the building. When the glass was fired, the silver stain turned a yellow color that would range from lemon to gold. Based on the chemical compounds of the paint used, determined the colors that the glass would turn into during the heating process. Stained glass is one of the foremost practiced forms of painting during the Gothic and Renaissance periods. As one of the most widespread forms of art, stained glass inspired the lives of the faithful through religious narratives in churches and in cloisters. Many of these works of art celebrated political ties in city halls and the family life. Even some private houses had stained glass windows. The basic procedure of producing stained glass windows hasn't changed a whole lot since the Middle Ages. The glass was made of sand and ash brought to a molten state through intense heat. Early on in this process, it was learned that the addition of metallic oxides would change the color of the molten glass. Once the molten glass was ready, glassmakers would blow the liquefied glass into a cylinder shape. They would then score the length of the cylinder and reheat the cylinder until it separated along the scored line and flattened out into a sheet of glass. This was called the muff process. Once the sheets of glass were ready for use, the artist would make a full-scale drawing on a whitewash board to use as a guide for the shapes that he wanted the glass to be cut into. The artist would take individual colored sheets of glass and begin to cut them into shapes that would make up a figural scene or an ornamental passage. The cutting was done with a hot iron that would crack the glass into rough approximations of the desired shape. Each piece of glass was then refined by carefully chipping away at the edges with an iron tool. This was called bronzing. Bronzing is how the artist got the glass to achieve the precise shape needed for the piece of art being made. Artists would take the cut pieces of glass and lay them onto the patterns. Using vitreous paint made of iron fillings and ground glass suspended in wine or urine, would then paint the features such as facial expressions or the folds in robes and drapery. Once all the glass was painted the way the artist liked, the pieces of glass would then be placed in a kiln and fired to fuse the paint to the glass surface. After the firing stage was complete and the paint was fused to the glass, would the artist finish the work, much like putting a puzzle together using strips of lead called camas. The Incarnation window at Chartres Cathedral tells us the story of the life of Christ. To read this story, you have to start at the bottom of the window, working from left to right. Each square of the window tells you about a key moment throughout the life of Christ. The first square of the window is the story of the Annunciation. In the next row up to the far right, the shepherds view the Star of Bethlehem. In the arch of the window is Mary and the Christ child, with angels on each side. Just below the arch you see Christ on a white donkey as he enters Jerusalem. The tree of Jesse, often thought of as a representation of the genealogy of Christ. Jesse trees are a common motif in the 12th and 13th century. All Jesse tree windows share a universal origin and show Christ as a descendant of the royal house of David. Jesse was the father of King David, and it is believed that Mary is a descendant of King David, fulfilling the prophecy in the book of Isaiah. The rose window is symbolic of the Virgin Mary. A rose window is round with mullions and traceries extending out like that of the petals of a rose. In the center of the window is the Virgin Mary. Above Mary are 4 white doves symbolizing gifts of the Holy Spirit. Finishing the first circle around Mary are angels. In the diamond shapes show crowned figures and are the kings of Judah. The small flowery shapes outside of the diamonds are the coat of arms of the royal houses of France. The outer half circles show standing prophets holding scrolls. The rose window measures 42 feet in diameter. Churches in early America were mostly used as meeting houses. They were simple in style and mostly made of wood or brick. Stained glass was either economically impractical or was deemed out of fashion. Most early churches in America only had shutters and when opened had no glass in the window. In the 1800s, with the revival of medieval-style glass in England, you start to see it make its way over to America. William Gibson began the earliest American glass business in New York City around 1834. It did not last long. However, he later promoted himself as the father of glass painting in the United States. In 1875, we start to see the works of Charles J. Connick of Boston. He is said to be the first American to master the art of stained glass. He understood the complexity of light, color, and design. Connick was a painter and a muralist. He was well known for his stained glass work in Gothic Revival style, incorporating a strong interest in symbolism. He felt that stained glass windows were to serve the architectural effect of the church. He was firmly committed to the handcraft tradition. However, he also welcomed innovation and experimentation in technique and design from his co-workers. Connick's stained glass works can be seen not only in Boston, but as far east as New York, and as far west as California and Seattle, Washington. Though not a whole lot has changed in the process of making stained glass, there have been some advancements. While there are still manufacturers who still blow molten glass into cylinders, then score the side and flatten, larger manufacturers take the molten glass and pour it into a press for uniform size and thickness. With these new advancements, we now have hundreds of colors and patterns of glass sheets to choose from. The cutting tools have also improved over the decades. Now, small pen-shaped tools with diamond or steel wheels cut the glass. We still paint special features on the glass with paint and fire in a kiln to fuse the paint to the glass. All in all, the art form is still relatively the same as it was in the beginning, and we still get beautiful works of art that will last for generations to come.